Well, greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. It is Saturday, and for those of you who are in the know, Saturday Nightmares live. For those of you who have not been to the live stream at Saturday night, it's at 12 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I hope to see you all there. I've got a great set of encounters and a very interesting subscriber encounter with photo and video. Before we get into it, a couple links. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. The merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They all were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It doesn't cost you a cent. Click that like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all these things, they really do help this channel to continue to grow and go. And yes, folks, they definitely do matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump into today's upload, shall we? Tonight's first encounter happens to be in my home state, in about a 2.5, 3-hour drive south. And it is pretty spooky there, I can tell you that. My friend Matt lived on the corner of South Carpenter and Sleepy Hollow, New York. His home was surrounded by woods. It had well water. His neighbors owned cows, horses, and many acres of land. Matt's sister was a medium, and she was able to communicate with spirits. She was kind of a gothic, and she had a strange group of friends. During one birthday party, a group of goths came back terrified. They said they had seen a witch in the woods. At first, they saw an old lady from the distance, and it seemed like she was lost and looking for something. They approached her, eager to help. They stepped closer and went to reach for her shoulder, and she began to laugh. She turned around and petrified the group. Most of the people thought the group was lying, but Matt knew his sister could tell that the kids were serious. They were actually scared, and the forest they were in was a labyrinth of spooky trees and definitely easy to get turned around in. Later that year, this is what occurred. Matt, Bill, and I were hiking during the winter months. There was no snow on the ground, but the air was sure crisp. We were bundled up and didn't plan to go too far, but of course we followed the trail, and it led us to a place we could have never imagined. I was following Matt, but he was not the best with directions. We were in a thick forest that we had never explored before. So we continued trekking, searching desperately for some familiar territory. It's getting dark now, and finally we heard cars. We made it to the road and saw it was Sleepy Hollow. I thought it was kind of funny and antagonized Bill and Matt about the Headless Horseman. But they were younger than I and started to cry. They were scared. It should have been straightforward to make it back to the house using the roads, but sadly, we didn't make the best decisions. Matt was oblivious to the surrounding streets and directions. He was clueless about how to get back. I remember the route my dad used very vaguely and attempted to lead us back. There were no sidewalks, so we began to walk in a ditch alongside the forest. After a while, Bill ran ahead of me. He said something was back there, something was following us. I didn't really believe him, and I stopped walking. I looked back and saw that he was definitely not lying. There was some kind of black, upright canine just walking behind us. We started to jog, and so did the creature. Matt and Bill were faster than me. I told them to run ahead, and I would get this thing away from us. By that point, I had a general idea of where I was. I beelined it to the forest and caught a trail. I couldn't see much, but the trees paved a way for me. I had no visual of the creature anymore, but I knew it was on my trail. After what felt like forever, I could hear the commotion from Matt's family's party, the flames from the bonfire peeking through the trees, and I felt relieved. I moved toward the tree line and suddenly went barreling into the ground. My foot caught a root, and I was badly scraped up, with my hands and knees bleeding. I rolled over in slow motion, and my life flashed before my eyes. I heard something crashing down the path maybe 30 yards from me. I hopped to my feet and went straight through the briars and branches, leaping to the illuminated grass. I made it to the fire, and the creature luckily left the darkness. Matt and Bill were already sitting in their mom's lap telling them a story. My parents were happy to see that I was still alive, but not surprised at all. The adults saw my wounds and gasped. I told them some creature had got me. Years later, my friend Alex moved nearby. He had 2 encounters with this creature, wolfman, whatever you want to call it. Once he and his 2 sisters saw a large lichen creature cross the road and scale a deep hill within seconds. His other encounter was with me. We saw a pair of eyes out on his patio in the woods, just outside the woods. It was the scariest night of my life, and I will never sleep there again. We tried to sleep in the basement, but we had to go upstairs because we were both too freaked out. Tonight's second part of the upload is an actual documented Dogman experience that occurred in Vitter, Texas. It was documented by the Orange County Historical Society back in 1978. And here that is. Vitter, Texas residents call a 6 feet with long shaggy hair and muscular canine body a werewolf. An elusive figure roams the night, clawing at window screens, howling and yelping like a wounded dog. Killer creature stalks Vitter area, Vitter, Texas. 20-year-old Bobby Bussinger got brave Monday night and decided to confront what North Tram Road residents were calling a werewolf. By the light of the full moon, he took his 12-gauge shotgun and walked to the back edge of his cleared lot. To his surprise, the erect form described to be taller than 6 feet with long, shaggy hair and a muscular body did not scare. It came toward him. He shot in a panic as he turned and ran back toward his home. He barely made it, he said. He then called the sheriff's office. Bobby and his 18-year-old wife Becky had lived at that house at 3925 North Tram Road for 14 weeks. It was owned by her father. The couple had only been married for a short time. They moved there 2 weeks after the wedding. Bussinger works as a laborer for a construction crew at the Goodyear Synthetic Rubber Company near Beaumont. They knew when they moved into that area that previous tenants left because of strange occurrences during the night. An elusive figure roams the night, clawing at window screens, howling and yelping like a wounded dog. It wasn't that bad at first, Becky said, from the safety of her parents' Beaumont home. But Sunday night, Deputy Sheriff Jack Reeves picks up the story. It was Reeves who responded at 11:30 p.m. to a prowler call. The Bussingers told him that Sunday night 3 of their dogs were believed killed. The hindquarters of 2 were maimed, and the dogs were killed. 1 is missing. All 3 are puppies of mixed bred. Part of the 8 dogs and a young couple kept on the property. Monday night after sundown, as the moon moved into a full phase, they heard a commotion like a good-sized dog fight, Reeves said. There was banging on the walls of the house, rapping on the windows, heavy footfalls outside, and an eerie barking and yelping filled the air. That is a historic, documented Dogman case. I have at my disposal probably a stack of paper that I compiled of old news articles documenting Dogman, Bigfoot, feral human. I did actually narrate all of these cases. For some reason, they weren't as popular as I thought they were going to be. I'd love to do it again because it is historical, you know. And it just goes to show that these things have been bothering humanity for hundreds, perhaps thousands of years, you know. I have a news article going back to like 1638 or 83. So, I mean, these things are real. Today's third encounter. I usually walk on a trail near my home in Massachusetts, South Shore, between Boston and Cape Cod. I don't know if this particular place has a name. I usually felt safe, even as a woman hiking alone. I had grown up in this area, and it's not like it's the city or anything. A few months ago, on a weekday late afternoon, I was walking along this trail. First, it had just started sprinkling, but then it came pouring down with thunder and lightning as well. I was more afraid of the lightning than anything. It was too far to run back to where I was parked, so there was a lot of giant rocks in the area. I saw this rock overhang off to the right of the trail on a hill. It was hollowed behind it, a small cave or something. I was not about to go into the cave, but I thought I'd at least stand under the overhang and not get wet. So I'm standing there waiting for this rain to slow down. I just had a feeling like something was watching me because the hair on the back of my neck started to raise. I felt compelled to turn around and look behind me into the darkness of this cave. At first, I didn't see anything. There are no bear or wolves in this area. If something was living in that cave, it was probably a small animal. At least, that's what I told myself. But when I was staring into that darkness, I saw a shadow shift. I knew something was in there. It didn't look like it could be very big, although at the time I couldn't really see much. The rain still coming down in sheets and the sky had gotten really dark. I stood watching the lightning strikes, and a few of them were pretty close. But between the loud thunderclaps, I heard it. There was a nasty sound, like a wet sound of something eating and lip smacking. I turned around to look in there, but I still couldn't see what it was. Then this putrid stench hit me. I guess the wind changed. It smelled rancid, like a dead raccoon on the side of the road. It made me gag instantly. I turned back to the woods to see if there may be another overhang a short distance away. It was obvious that there was some kind of animal eating another dead animal in this cave, and I just wanted to put some distance between me and it. I took another couple steps away from the cave, and now I'm getting wet from the rain. I didn't see any other place to go. Then all at once, I heard a sound behind me, like rocks clattering. I turned around to look. The shadow of this thing inside was rising, and I realized all at once that this creature was not small like I had thought. It had been crouched down, and now it was standing. It must have been easily 7 feet standing on its hind legs, and it totally took me by surprise. I froze for a second when I realized it was like something straight out of a nightmare. It had a dog face with a snout, only it was like a man, a big man covered in fur. I could see large dog ears on its head. I screamed and stumbled. I almost fell down the hill. And that's when it growled just like a dog about to attack. I really thought I was going to die. I'm getting goosebumps just remembering it. I took off running, feeling like my life was in danger. And thank God it didn't follow me. Of course, no one believed me. But then I looked up into this creature and found on the internet that people are posting stuff about this creature called the Dogman. Tonight's fourth encounter. On the day this happened, I was hiking on a small trail alongside of a stream off of a forest road in Leeson National Forest in northeastern California. There were a couple of cars along the road, so I thought it'd be a safe place for me to hop out onto a small trail. I like to hike in some odd places, practicing my navigation skills with a map and a compass and my phone's GPS app tracking my path. I like to pinpoint some unique land features on a topo map and then go find them. I usually go with my orienteering group. But that day, I was hiking solo. When I'm alone, I don't go too far into the forest. However, the events of that day drove me deep into the forest. The stream was rather small compared to the actual stream bed, which was odd considering there would have been a decent snowfall over the winter. I also noticed that there was a lot of algae in this stream, and a quarter of a mile in I could smell a rotting trout along before I came upon it. There were pieces of trash littered along the stream. I also came across a few dead animals near the stream as I walked this trail. It was disgusting, but I assume this is a popular area with teens or target shooters, and they probably left some trash behind. I didn't know that these were warning signs of what I was walking into. About a mile into the trail diverged from the stream and cut through some shrubs and trees. I was close to my destination, a spot along the stream that looked like it could possibly have a small waterfall. The trail turned left and it opened up into a large flat clearing. I stopped immediately looking across this clearing. There was trash everywhere and there were rows of cultivated dirt, but the plants were all uprooted. There was a holding pond lined with plastic sheeting along the stream, and there was a pile of sports drink bottles filled with this milky pink fluid along next to it. Along the edges of the garden were what looked like homemade spike strips, boards with nails driven through them. I could smell a distinct odor of marijuana in the air. This was an illegal grow operation. There had been enough news reports about what happens to people who come across these illegal grow sites for me to know that I needed to get away and fast. I turned and ran into the shrubs on the opposite side of the trail, hiding behind the crumbling tree stump. I checked my map to make sure I was heading into uneven terrain. There I would be unlikely to find another garden. The cars at the trailhead likely belonged to whoever was maintaining this garden, but since they weren't at this location, they were probably at another. I started to stand up but dropped back down holding my position when I heard a pair of male voices speaking Spanish. I recognized a few words like mountain and up when they were talking and kept repeating grande, grande. When their voices faded, I quietly started to go in the opposite direction, putting distance between us. The map indicated that if I kept going east, there were no streams and there would be some decent elevation change. But afterward, there was a forest road I could follow. I walked straight through, maintaining an eastbound path for an hour and a half, until I heard a soft wailing sound coming from the left. I stopped dead in my tracks. It sounded like nothing I had ever heard before. It didn't sound like an animal. It kind of sounded human. I could smell a strange odor in the air, and I noticed some long tracks on the ground that looked like a bear double-stepping. But one side had splotchy blood in it, I grabbed my bear spray and my knife out of my bag and stood still, looking for the source of this noise. I took a couple of steps forward, and everything went silent. Suddenly, I felt something crash into my left side near the rear, knocking me to the ground. I looked up terrified that it was a bear, but it looked like a massive man, covered in dirty blonde hair and very tan skin. He grunted at me and then collapsed on the ground, his feet near my face. I could see a massive gash in the sole of his foot with pine needles and dirt sticking to the blood that was oozing out. I heard voices coming from the direction I had just come from. I wasn't sure if it was the same men, but I didn't want to risk it. I jumped onto my feet, smacked his leg, and said, "Go," as loud as I dared. I started running east, and I heard his limping footsteps pounding on the ground, heading slightly north of me. There was a hill ahead with several large boulders that I could somewhat see through the thick trees. I continued running until I reached it. I climbed upon that hill and smelled that weird stench again. I followed the odor and I found the hairy man collapsed on his back on the ground. He was taking short, rapid breaths. I could see that he had 2 holes in the far right side of his chest where there was also blood oozing. He looked human, yet he really didn't. He looked like he could kill me in a single hand. But I had an overwhelming urge to help him. I knelt down beside it and grabbed his massive hand and checked for a pulse. I could feel a strong beating under his skin, giving me hope. He looked at me with eyes that seemed to ask for help. I pulled the first aid kit out of my pack and looked at what I was trying to figure out the best way to make anything work. I keep a day kit light, carry only things that will patch me up enough to get help. I only had 2 hemostatic gauze pads. The chest wounds were the most concerning. I put my ear near the wounds, listening for sucking sounds, then applied the gauze when I heard none. I applied pressure for several minutes, then ripped 2 pieces of tape off a roll to hold them there. This creature's eyes were slightly open and watching me. I gestured for him to open his mouth. He closed his eyes with his mouth still shut. He could have indicated to me by now if he didn't want me touching him, so I went for it. I carefully pulled open his mouth to check his gums and tongue, keeping my fingers clear just in case he snapped down. His gums were dark, but his tongue was pink. I didn't see any signs that his lungs had been punctured, but when I looked at his teeth, they weren't quite like a human's. His canine teeth were larger, but not oversized like a gorilla's. Once the critically injury was dressed, I went down to work on his foot. I washed it gently with some water from my pack. He started moaning, lifting his head up and looking at me, but he didn't jerk his foot away. I did my best trying to clean it, using one of my maxi pads to wipe away any debris and dry skin. The cut was long, nearly an inch deep across most of it, and there was a hole at the top of his foot as well. His foot was very broad and flat, and the wound was trying to splay open. I filled the cut with ointment and used the tape to make a massive butterfly strip to pull the 2 sides of the wound together, leaving drainage gaps between the strips. I left the hole on top uncovered to serve as a drainage as well. I then took my last maxi pad and strapped it to the bottom of his foot, almost like a sandal, using the tape across the top. I looked back up at his face and I could see a small trickle of blood running on the ground by his head. I had missed a wound someplace. I went back to his side and pulled his arm, hoping he would get the idea to roll over. He was far too heavy for me to roll over without help. Finally, he rolled onto his side and I found 2 jagged exit wounds on his back. about the size of my thumb. I didn't have much in that first aid kit, but I still had some tampons. I opened one of the tampon packages and pulled out the applicator and about an inch deep and inserted the tampon, leaving about a third of it outside of his body. I repeated this in the other hole and then pulled his arm to get him to his back to keep pressure on these tampons. Once he was flat again, he closed his eyes and his breathing slowed down. The creature seemed to be sleeping. I stayed there watching him for a couple of minutes, cleaning up my trash when I heard shots in the distance. I needed to get down to where I could find help, but I couldn't leave him exposed. My cell phone didn't have service at this point, so I needed to get down to that road. I didn't think it was likely whoever was shooting that gun would come up the hill, but I gathered up a few branches I could find to cover him up, and hopefully he would stay sleeping until I could come back. I started down the hill on the eastern side, heading toward that forest road. Once I hit the flat dirt, I ran south until I saw a truck heading down the road towards me. I could see a light bar on top, and I felt relieved at this point. I knew I was safe. A ranger pulled up to me, and I broke down. I knew I couldn't come right out and talk about this Sasquatch. Instead, I told the ranger about the illegal grow operation, and I said that I saw a severely wounded bear with young cubs they had shot. It was a lie, but I needed him to go back with me and check. And he definitely probably wouldn't believe me if I told him about the Sasquatch. We drove back to that hill, and we ascended where I had hid him. The ranger was following close behind me with his gun drawn. The ranger wanted me to follow behind. I wanted to make sure I was the first face this creature saw. He likely wouldn't survive another gunshot wound, and if he slammed into the ranger as he did to me, the ranger was likely to shoot him. When I was able to see the top of the hill, I could see the branches, but he was gone. The blood from his back was still there, but the branches I had covered him were arranged into an X on that ground. It's been 6 years since that day, but I still feel like it was yesterday. Since I didn't see him get his injuries, I'll never know for certain what happened. I've read stories about them being protectors of the forest, and I think that's what went on. These illegal growers divert water from streams to grow their weed, and their camping garbage brings a lot of wildlife to their gardens. They use very highly potent, sometimes illegal rodenticides and insecticides, and large die-offs are common around these grow sites. Everything from birds to bears. It would make sense that he would want to push them out of his forest. I'm certain he was shot, and I think he was running away. He must have stepped on a spike trip that ripped through his foot. I did my best to take care of him, and I wish I knew this creature was okay. Tonight's fifth and final encounter is a subscriber-submitted experience, and I will include the photos at the end of the encounter so you guys can check them out as well. Jeff, hope all is well. I started listening to your show a while back, and I caught a few of your Saturday night live streams. I mentioned I've bought some land down in Monticello, Kentucky, on the Cumberland River. I went on vacation May 21st, 2023 to June 5th, 2023, on my property with my dog Patton, a 65-pound Belgian Malinois, who goes everywhere with me no matter how. I was down there to clear cut some vegetation, enjoy nature, camp, and relax. I am an outdoorsy type of person. I hunt, camp, fish, etc. as a Boy Scout. I'm familiar with the wilderness and wildlife in and around where I bought my property. I lived down there throughout my junior high and high school years. May 22nd, I got to my property at 11:34 a.m. I started clearing a spot to make camp. I got some fallen trees cut up for firewood. At around 1700, I started setting camp up. After about a half an hour, I was tired from the weed-eating thick vegetation. At 1800, I let Patton out of his crate and went for a walk with him down a dirt road. Mind you, my property is undeveloped land. We walked a couple of miles and then back to camp. Started dinner, fed and watered Patton, got ready to settle down for the evening to listen to some sounds of nature. Then I went to bed and had to get up early and start the same process over for the next 4 days and nights. On the fifth night is when things started to get weird. Patton woke me up with a low growling and a defensive bark. Next thing I hear was something big taking off running through the woods behind my tent/shelter. At first, I thought it was a deer since they are running rampant out in these parts, but I realized there was that eerie silence, that no sound of night, like bugs, crickets, etc. So, I'm not really sure if it was a deer, but my sixth night, my dog went nuts in his crate, waking me up, barking, growling, like he was Cujo, and again, something went barreling off through the woods. The next morning, I put Patton on his leash and started looking for tracks to see if I could find out what Patton was barking at. I didn't see any tracks at all, so I went back to camp and put Patton in his crate and grabbed my chainsaw and started cutting down some trees to make a path to the river so it'll be easier to hike to. And I plan to cut out a camp spot close to the river for fishing and canoeing. I love that my backyard is going to be the river when I get my cabin built out there. But back to why I'm sending you this email. After I finished with the cutting down some trees, I went back to camp, made lunch. My neighbor came down with his side-by-side, asked how I was doing and seeing what progress I had made, clearing some of the property since the vegetation was thick. He asked me if I needed anything, and if I did, not to hesitate to ask. I said, cool, thanks, and he left. So to keep my mind occupied, I worked on a couple of bushcraft projects, and I figured I'd build a fire. I didn't have a fire the whole time I camped because it was pretty hot. I had one of those jet boil camp stoves I cooked on. The night I built the fire is when the eerie silence returned and Patton started to low growl this time while I was still awake. I'm not sure how far away the creatures were. I know it was two of them, and it was not coyotes. One sounded pretty good ways off, and one sounded it was about 75 yards away or closer. They sounded like they were talking and laughing like hyenas would do. And then off in the far distance, I heard a combination of a woman's scream, but yet like a howl. I did pop off a round out of my pistol into the closest tree to stop the bullet from traveling. Yeah, I had firearms with me, a 45-70 government and my AR, as well as my pistol. Needless to say, after daybreak, I packed my things up into the Jeep and went to my mom's, which is an hour away. If I go back out there, I'll have to not be alone for safety concerns. But I have pictures to give you an idea of my property. Not sure what I heard, but it scared me. And like I said, I know the sounds of animals like coyote and deer, etc. Anyhow, Jeff, keep up the good work. Maybe next time I go down there, I'll have my GoPro and a veteran friend of mine go investigate some more. But it's too dangerous to go by myself trampling through these woods. I fell several times trying to cut a path to the river. I had a chainsaw in my hands when I did take those falls. I'll send more photos in another email when I have signal. If you want to read this to your listeners on your show, it's fine with me. People need to know things do go bump in the night, scream and howl, and sound like laughing hyenas. All right, guys, that was the photos that this gentleman shared with us. That's his camp. As you can see, it's pretty dense out there. Wow, what an amazing set of experiences. Those videos and photos, sharing the location, providing the kind of, or setting the scene for us, I guess, is pretty awesome. Guys, I cannot wait until tonight's live stream. I cannot wait to see you all there. It is literally the pinnacle of my week. 12 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Saturday Nightmares live from New York. Guys, thank you for supporting the channel. Your support is what makes this channel continue to grow and go on a daily basis. And it's also what makes this channel special. The amount of welcomeness that you guys have for other and new subscribers, courtesy and respect, helps people who were kind of teetering on sharing their experience or sharing their theories elsewhere. It's welcomed here, and it's just an amazing community you guys have created. Thank you. Please, everyone, stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, our pets, our family, and friends. We all know these creatures are real, and they are out there, and they are dangerous. Share this information with the people you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Guys, until next time, never stop asking questions, and never stop searching for those answers.